I mean, Trump and Zelensky, the war of words effectively continues, particularly because Zelensky made the mistake, another mistake, in my view, of suggesting that the war is long from over. That's not the position that Trump is taking. He wants to get a deal done. And if he does not get a peace deal done, there's an increasing likelihood that he will turn his back on Zelensky. And I think the pause in military aid is another shot across the bow, if you will, to try to communicate to Zelensky that you can wear whatever getup you want to come to the Oval Office. But when you come to the Oval Office to sign an agreement, you sign the agreement and we move forward. And if you don't want to do that, whatever rhetoric you use or don't use, then you're going to have problems. And I can't believe that Zelensky believes the bro hugs from the Western European leaders are going to be enough to salvage his country absent America's engagement. I can't believe he believes that. And Trump yesterday saying again, yeah, Europe needs to step up. But I thought this was interesting, too. I mean, just a reminder of the human toll that this is taking, this war in Eastern Europe is taking. Yes, Russia was the instigator, but if there is no likelihood, or if we're not willing to pay the price that would increase the likelihood of repelling the Russians, pushing them out of Ukraine, then what exactly is the point of piling up the body count?
I want one thing to happen. I want all of those young people to stop being killed. They're being killed by the thousands every single week. Last week, 2,700 were killed. 2,700 young, in this case, just about all young boys from Ukraine and from Russia. And that's not young people from the United States, but it's on a human basis. I want to see it stop. The money is one thing, but the death, and they're losing thousands of soldiers a week. And that's not including the people that get killed every time a town goes down or a missile goes into a town.
And then on the other side, you have to deal with the silliness. I mean, if you thought Mark Kelly, Senator Mark Kelly, we played earlier, his PTSD comment was beneath him.
Exactly.
And I don't mean as a senator, because there's nothing beneath politicians, particularly on the left, but I mean as a former Navy pilot, was beneath him. But I mean, that's nothing compared to what you're dealing with on a routine basis from this know-nothing group of leftists that actually dominate that party, like, for example, fake eyelashes Spice of the Socialist Spice Girls, one Jasmine Crockett.
Unfortunately, we have someone that is occupying the White House, and as far as I'm concerned, he is an enemy to the United States. He swore an oath just like the rest of us. But right now, when you are literally putting us at risk, all because of what? Because you want to convince your followers that you should be a dictator too, that you should never leave the White House because you don't believe that elections should take place. I don't really understand what is going on, and I don't know what it's going to take to get people to wake up.
I agree that Jasmine Crockett does not understand what's going on. Okay. I do agree with her on that.
That part, yes.
KT McFarland is a former first deputy national security advisor to President Trump. She's also the author of the bestseller Revolution, Trump, Washington, and We the People. KT, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Well, I completely agree with everything you've just said, so I guess this interview doesn't even necessally have to happen.
No. We've
KT,
got a lot more to get into. So I mean, just I mean, what do you think is Zelensky's thinking? I mean, he's making a situation that went sideways on Friday worse with each passing that day. It just doesn't. I just don't see how this serves his interests.
Neither do I. What I did, Dan and Amy, is I spent the spring and the summer and right before the election going to a number of Eastern European countries to explain to a lot of the government leaders this is what Trump's America First policy means. Here's what it means for you. Here's what it means for us. Here's the thinking behind it. And everywhere I went, and a number of Ukrainians would show up, foreign ministers, ministers of this, that, would show up at country after country that I went to. And their line was, well, we expect that you're going to give us, as President Biden has said, whatever it takes as long as it takes. And I said, no, that's not going to be the Trump plan. The Trump plan will be to get to the negotiating table, craft something. Neither side is going to be happy. Everybody's going to have just enough to survive with, but you're going to get a deal. And then you go and you can let Ukraine win the peace. Ukraine is not winning the war. Ukraine is losing the war. Even with all the American assistance that already has gone forward, it is losing the war. It will continue to lose the war. And then they keep going around in a circular thinking of, well, we can't trust Vladimir Putin, so therefore we shouldn't even negotiate. Or they're saying we can't reward Vladimir Putin, so therefore we can't have a peace deal. And it's like that's the prescription for a forever war. That's World War I. That's trench warfare. And so and I think Zelensky and the people like-minded, they cannot get out of that circular thinking. They can't bring themselves to say, okay, it's not fair, but we're going to get some way to end this war because Ukraine will prosper greatly after the fighting stops. Russia will not prosper greatly, but they just can't get past that. And I think Zelensky, and you said, he just keeps doubling down. He just keeps saying the same thing of security guarantees. We expect, well, maybe if we stop the fighting, we expect America to give us security guarantees, which in effect is NATO membership or maybe NATO light.
Well, I mean, also why not sign the mineral deal? Because then you have America's economic interests that are a deterrent effect to Ukraine. And then if there are other things that you want to try to extract more from Trump, or you want to push back on what he's willing to accept from Putin, at least you've banked some chits with Trump by agreeing to this deal and showing that you're constructive. I mean, the mineral deal isn't the end of the larger deal. It's the beginning of it, but he can't even get out of the starting gate.
He won't. And I don't know what happens next. I mean, as President Trump is putting a pause on military aid to Ukraine. Look, Ukraine doesn't last 2 weeks without American military assistance. And for all the squawking the Europeans are doing, they don't have the wherewithal, the ability, or really the will to replace the United States as the main supplier of Ukrainian weapons. And they're even, the Europeans are talking now about putting troops into Ukraine. We're not putting troops into Ukraine. Europeans want to. I guess that's up to them. But the United States is not going to go to World War III over Ukraine. And the other thing that is just so frustrating is you're so right about the mineral deal. Think about what the mineral deal would do. It would put thousands of American engineers and miners and project managers on the ground in eastern Ukraine. It would integrate our economies. It would be a prosperous venture for both the United States and Ukraine. And talk about a deterrent. Do you really think Vladimir Putin is going to kill thousands of Americans on his way to Kyiv? It's just they're not thinking clearly, and they're not thinking realistically. They still, in their minds, think somehow Russia is going to give back Crimea, and Russia is going to go back to Moscow, and Russia's going to have no Ukrainian territory. And that's just not the real world.
Well, Zelensky, I mean, does he want U.S. troops to guard those, the minerals while people are digging them out of the ground? I mean, does he want troops or just civilians to be security there, or do we not even know?
Well, we don't know, but he keeps saying, whether it was in the Oval Office or when he had an interview with Bear, or when he even had whatever he said the other day about that's not enough. The mineral deal isn't enough. I need more. I need security guarantees. And security guarantees is code word for American military force to protect our borders. In other words, that's NATO. That's what NATO membership is, right? Mm-hmm. If we're all in this together, and President Trump does not feel that Ukraine is going to be a NATO member, and neither do 95% of the American people. Well,
it's got to be exceedingly frustrating for Trump, for people like you who served on his national security team, because the things that you were saying, he was saying 8 years ago about, for example, Western Europe financing both sides of this war through things like the Germany's oil and gas deal with Russia make no sense. I don't like it. It shouldn't happen. We need to be more independent, more energy independent in this country too. Oh, by the way, I mean the things that you guys were saying, and the president has been saying at UN during UN speeches in front of the NATO Secretary General. Now all of a sudden you have Jake Tapper repeating on CNN. It's like, thank you for joining the party. And in addition to what Trump said yesterday, too, let me give you a 25-year history of Russia revanchism. In this century, the only time Russia hasn't invaded and expanded the territory under its control is when this guy was president. Bush, Obama, Biden, and you want to give me the are you aligned with Moscow business? Go pound sand.
Yeah, and President Trump is looking way beyond Ukraine. It's not, the Europeans in Ukraine think Russia, Russia, Russia. That's all they think about because that's their world. But President Trump is looking way beyond that, and he's seen that a combination of Russia and China together in an alliance aimed at the United States is an existential threat to us, right? It's Russian weapons, Russian natural resources, Chinese technology, Chinese money. That's the kind of threat the United States has not had aimed against it since the Revolutionary War. And so President Trump is looking to say, can I put a wedge between China and Russia? Can I do what Henry Kissinger did in the 1970s and break up the Chinese-Russian alliance? And to do that, he needs to have a negotiation, some kind of a deal. Who knows what the terms of that deal is with Russia? He needs to pull Russia out of the Chinese orbit. And you're not going to do that if you're paying for both sides of the war, and you're certainly not going to do that if you won't even talk to the Russians.
Turning attention to the Middle East, and as anticipated, Hamas is not exactly living up to the particulars of phase one of the hostage exchanges, and so the things are deteriorating there. If you're advising Trump to, in terms of what to do with respect to Netanyahu, what are you saying today?
Let the Israelis go in and finish the job and just do it quickly. Kill every last Hamas. Because Hamas, as long as there's one glowing ember left of Hamas, they'll reignite that flame. They have every single time. So take away their ability to do that again. And maybe President Trump is right. Think outside the box. He keeps thinking outside the box. And he thinks like a businessman. And he says, 80% of Gaza has been destroyed. It's rubble. 90% of Gazan the people who live in Gaza don't have jobs, unemployment. And so Hamas, if you had the elections tomorrow, Hamas would probably win again. Mm-hmm. So you gotta clear the place out, rebuild it, and then maybe the people can come back. But you vet who comes back across the border. No more Hamas guys coming across the border.
Right, but where do they go in the meantime? Because no nearby countries want them.
Well, nobody wants them. I mean, they all understand the lethal threat of Hamas. But on the other hand, we give Jordan, we give Egypt, we give a lot of countries in that region a lot of money. We don't get much for it. So maybe we talk to Egypt and say, you've got a big Sinai desert, big Sinai Peninsula. Maybe you can temporarily, you don't have to integrate them into your society, but temporarily park them there for a few years until they can, so a rebuilding of Gaza, first demolition and then rebuilding of Gaza. And then the Palestinians could come back, and what would they have? They'd have jobs. There would be, there would be an entertainment industry. There would be a hospitality industry. There'd be a building industry. And then once you start having people with jobs and education, maybe you break the cycle. But you cannot rebuild on the rubble that's there and expect anything different to happen.
Yeah, although we're probably a long way away from that AI brochure of Trump and Bibi enjoying pina coladas poolside. Yeah. I wanted to get your take on something else, too. I mean, this is a little bit below the fold, but it has some Republican infighting, and it's over Elbridge Colby, who is Trump's nominee for Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. And it sort of represents a bit of a divide even within the ranks of Trump supporters in terms of America's posture. The argument against Colby suggests basically he's a bit of an isolationist, more so than is prudent at this juncture for America. What's your take on him? Where do you come down on this fight over Colby?
Well, Elbridge Colby is a longtime defense intellectual, think tank guy, been in the first Trump administration, and he's really the sort of intellectual voice of let's focus more on Asia. We focused on the Middle East, we focused on Europe. We need to focus more on Asia because that's where our strategic interest lies. We are an Asian power, as well as all the other powers, but Asia is really our future. And so he's saying, don't get so embroiled, but don't get consumed by the Middle East and don't get consumed by Europe. And I think that probably reflects President Trump's thinking. So the debate will be in the Republican Party will be the sort of old Republicans, I guess we could call them the Bush Republicans, the neocons, the let's fight, the John Bolton wing of let's fight everywhere. And there'll be, or the other wing of the party, which says, look, we've got to marshal our resources. We can't be everywhere all the time. We're not the world's policeman. So we should focus more on Asia. And my guess is that President Trump can weigh in on the side of Elbridge Colby and get him confirmed. But it's going to be a contest. Why? Because of the timing of it. Because it's happening just as the Ukraine problem is boiling over.
Yeah, and the Middle East, the situation in the Middle East, which Colby just has described as a sort of a tertiary interest, which obviously is concerning to Israel, for starters.
I would have chosen, I agree with a lot of what Bridge Colby says. I would have used very different words.
Yeah.
I would have said, look, for 20 years, the United States has been so preoccupied with the Middle East that we lost track of what China was up to. Now we need to focus more on China. And President Trump, with the Abraham Accords, has given us a way to peace in the Middle East. And then I would have not said, that Europe doesn't matter. I would say Europe is a very important ally to the United States. But it's very difficult for the United States to continue to underwrite NATO while Germany and other countries in NATO are buying Russian gas. Mm-hmm. We are paying for both sides of that fight. We're underwriting them where the money that they should be spending is on buying American natural gas and American resources, and they should also use whatever else money they have to build up their own defenses. Germany is disarmed. There's no real defense industry in Germany. They've disarmed. They thought that they could have trade with Russia, and that would keep Russia in the box because they wouldn't go to war with each other. Russia would be tamped down because it would have such an economic interest in selling gas to Europe that Russia wouldn't attack in any way. And they were so wrong on every one of those scores. But now it's up to the Europeans to try to, they're scratching their heads this week. Dan, they don't know what to do because they don't have a defense industry. They don't have the money. They don't have the wherewithal. But yet they want to complain about the United States, and they think that Zelensky should be able to fight a forever war on our dime. It's just, again, unrealistic.
Katie McFarland, former First Deputy National Security Advisor, President Trump, author of Revolution, Trump, Washington, and We the People. Katie, thank you as always. Appreciate it.
It's always fun to be with you, and the two of you are just great. Keep doing your job.
All right. Thank you. Thanks so much for coming on. And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Hear about the big stories of the day, then talk about them right here on Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Come on with this, people. Move it!
Did you really think you could make that company deliver yourself?
Oh, I cannot handle any more traffic.
You could be getting much more done at your place of business.
I've wasted 45 minutes and now this place is